3, 2, 1, action!
Well, welcome to another Empathy Tale. This is Victoria Wolders, and if you want to connect with me, feel free to reach out at mykidslocker.com. Well, today we are doing another Empathy Tale, episode 5, The Cup, the Paints, and the Singing Bowl. Well, I want to dedicate this story to Kathy Jansen, and she is part of a hiking club I'm part of, and I want to dedicate it to her because she actually was one of the reasons why I wrote this story. She showed me the importance of empathy through perspective taking, and that was pretty cool. So this was told on July 15th, 2018, and the quote today is, "The opposite of anger is not calmness, but empathy." And that was said by Mehmet Oz. I feel like there's so many times where we jump to conclusions and we make our own judgments of people and storylines. And I just think sometimes we just need to be more empathetic. And I think it actually helps us live our lives better. So this story is about a father and 3 daughters, and 2 of the daughters are very ungrateful. But he was able to show empathy to them because he felt sorry for them. He felt bad for them. Their mother had died, and the father just felt like he hadn't done a good job. Now, I understand that there's no justification for people treating other people badly. And I get that. But we are surrounded by human beings that are hurt, and they also love. And I just think somewhere along the lines of this circle or cycle of anger, when you're hurt, or when you're hurt, you hurt me, and then I hurt someone else, and then and then that person hurts someone else, and it just keeps going. Somewhere it just has to stop. Right? It has to stop. Maybe it involves boundaries and actually saying, hey, this is not okay. And other times, maybe it just has to be with perspective taking and empathy. And that's a hard thing about life. Not understanding other people's perspectives. So this story is really interesting because there are gifts that are given from the father to the daughters. And there's something special that happens at the very end. And I hope that during this time when I'm reading this story that you will think about people in your life that may have not treated you well. And maybe for a moment you can take some time to think about maybe what is their pain? What is their disability? What is their life like? Right? I think about a friend of mine who shared a story about a colleague that works with her and how this colleague was having a really hard time at work. And my friend was just like, she goes home to 2 parents that are very disabled and need care 24/7. And that this colleague, she was struggling at work with some social relationships, but in the end, she's struggling because her job really starts when she leaves work. She's taking care of her parents, and that's really hard. And as we move through adulthood, our stories become more complex because we've been living longer, and there's more things that happen to us. So as we're reading this story, maybe take some time to think about people in your life, maybe one person in your life that maybe hasn't treated you very well. And maybe start thinking about, why do you think that person was acting that way? And maybe tell the story to yourself to be able to help empathize. Okay, well, with that being said, I hope you enjoy this story. And think about someone that has hurt you and perhaps why they hurt you and maybe what their story is. Okay, so the cup, the paints, and the singing bowl. Are you comfortable? Then I'll begin. The cup, the paints, and the singing bowl. Dedicated to Kathy Jansen for teaching me the importance of empathy through perspective taking. Story told Sunday, July 15th, 2018. The opposite of anger is not calmness, but empathy. Mehmet Oz. Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, in the kingdom of the Oak and Eagle, there lived 3 sisters in a valley. Their mother had passed away and their father was a businessman. Most of the time, the sisters did not see other people, and the sisters grieved the loss of their loving mother. The eldest was resentful for the passing of her mother. The second was hardened by the death. And the third chose to cry her tears until memories of her mother's goodness was the only thing to see in the midst of the waves of mourning. In time, the girls changed to grow older, and in time became distant to each other. The eldest was vain and was an arrogant individual. She only thought about herself, and this would hinder the family because she was not well liked among the villagers. People would avoid her because of her vain approach to life. The second daughter was disobedient. She chose to be rude and unkind to her father and family. The third daughter was kind and gracious. She had a peaceful heart. She chose to be compassionate and kind. One day, the father turned to the 3 girls and said, "I am going into the village, and I hope to get a gift for each of you." The first replied, "I don't really care." The second said, "You won't get me anything good." The third kindly stated, "Whatever you get me, I will be happy with, Father, because I know you are kind." So the father went away and came back. He presented each of his daughters with a beautiful teacup each. Each were hand-decorated. The first daughter had a beautiful handcrafted blue teacup. The second daughter had a sunshine yellow teacup, and the third daughter had a rose teacup. In all 3 teacups, there were beautiful inscriptions to each of them. The first looked at her teacup. There were different etchings on the teacup, and the exquisite detailing was beautiful. The first daughter responded, "I don't drink tea," as she dropped it on the ground and walked away. The pieces were broken on the floor. The second daughter said, "Father, I knew you wouldn't get me a good gift. You just don't know me." She threw it to the ground and it broke into a million teeny pieces. She looked at the broken pieces and waltzed away. The third daughter, with her head down, moved toward her father and clasped his hand. "Thank you, Father, for the gift of my teacup. I will treasure it always." "You're welcome, my daughter. I love you." "I love you too, Father." And with that, the girl walked away to do her chores. In time, the girls grew in knowledge of the world around them. The 2 older sisters chose to make unwise decisions, and the third one would constantly be gracious and practice gratitude intentionally. So the father decided to go on another trip. The eldest daughter said, "Make sure you get me something good, something that is beautiful, and something I will actually use." "Father, I'm so tired of you buying me the wrong gifts. You need to buy me something good." The father had compassion on these 2 daughters, as they were so focused on what they wanted that they forgot the importance of a shared experience. He hurt, but shortly after he put himself in their perspective, he soon realized the pains of their mother had hurt them very deeply, and the scars of his absence were still tender. They were wounded in their souls. He was saddened by his 2 daughters. Even though he tried to share kindness and care with them, they continued to choose to hurt with their words and actions. The third daughter turned to her father as she was mending one of her sister's dresses. "Father, thank you so much for taking the time to spend money on me. Any gift will be appreciated by me." So the father came back carrying 3 sets of paints and paintbrushes. The paints were beautiful. The first tossed the paint and the paintbrush into the sink, saying, "You did it again, Father. You don't do anything right. I don't paint, and I am not going to start." The second turned to her father and sighed. The father thought perhaps there was kindness about to appear because of the pause. The second said, "I am so disappointed in your gift to me." She threw it in the bathtub with the water running. All the paints were gone within minutes. The third daughter, even though she was not a painter, looked at her father in his eyes. "I am grateful for your kindness to me. I will treasure them always." So a couple years went by, and the father chose to go to the town for a third time. The two eldest daughters chose to roll their eyes and cross their arms as their father packed his bags. As the father left, the third daughter hugged him closely, and he smiled a smile of contentment. The father returned after a long journey. He chose to buy crystal bowls. These bowls, handmade by fairies, were very special because they would sing beautiful songs when touched gently. He thought if he put 3 in front of them, then each of them could choose their bowl, and then they would be grateful. The father called his daughters together. He announced, "If you take your finger at the top of the bowl and rub it around the edge of the bowl, you will hear the bowl singing to you." There was a melodic tone to each of the bowls that were unique and special. The father placed the 3 glass bowls on the table. The daughters were to choose their bowl. The first daughter replied, "I don't use bowls," and tossed it to the ground. The second daughter laughed. "What is this, a hat?" She put it on her head to mock her father and walk around in a silly manner. Afterwards, she then pranced around, throwing it to the eldest daughter. The eldest daughter fumbled, and it smashed on the ground. The 2 girls laughed and walked away. The third daughter was delighted by the gift. "Thank you, father, for the gift. I will treasure it forever." The youngest daughter noticed the days after that incident. There was a difference in the father's attitude. He seemed quieter and more withdrawn. Within 2 weeks, he had announced to his daughters about his final trip for the year. He left quickly and chose to not tell the daughters. The daughters were surprised, but went back to their chores. After a week passed, the eldest turned to the older 2 daughters. "He didn't even say goodbye to us." The second replied, "I can't believe it." The third turned and acknowledged, "I don't understand why he wouldn't tell us. I wonder if he is coming back tomorrow." A week passed and the father hadn't returned. They waited the day. He never showed. They waited a second day, and he never came. After a week and 3 days passed, the youngest turned to the 2 sisters, urging them they need to go find their father. "We need to find our father. I think he's just late, and I'm too lazy to find him." The second daughter agreed. "Yes, we just need to wait." The third stood up straight with her shoulders back, stating, "We need to find our father." After an hour of talking, the 2 older sisters disagreed, and so the youngest chose to pack her bag and go find her father. First, she packed water, some bread, and the 3 gifts her father gave her: the teacup, the paints with a paintbrush, and her singing bowl. These gifts were placed delicately in her bag. As she started on her journey, she saw a poor man sitting on the side of the road. However, he was thirsty, and she poured water into her treasured teacup and gave it to him. He looked up from the ground and said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Yet, soon after she left the man, she saw beautiful birds in a birch tree. These birds were magical, were bright blue and yellow feathers. They would swoop down to her feet and walk with her gingerly. As the birds gathered on the birch tree, she noticed a sign pointing to the village. It had fallen from a branch. She picked up the sign and repainted the arrow on the sign and wedged it back into the tree with the beautiful birds. She left some breadcrumbs for the birds to eat as she walked away. As she traveled closer to the village, she saw a man with patches on his eyes sitting on the side of the dirt road. She assumed he was blind. He had a large cloak on that hung on his head and covered his whole body. This poor man begged on the side of the road. As he begged, he sung, and his song was a soft to her ears and gentle to her heart. Villagers passed by, and they dropped some coins near him. The girl sat next to him and brought out her singing bowl. With the gentle touch of her fingers, she was able to make beautiful music alongside this man. Together, their songs united in harmony. The man leaned over to her. "Thank you for using your singing bowl. I can hear and feel the money being dropped in my lap. I will be able to feed my family tonight," she replied. "You're welcome. I will leave you my singing bowl to use. However, I must go because I need to find my father." As she wandered closer to the village, she thought to herself, "I no longer have my teacup. I have a little bit of paint left, and I gave away my singing bowl." She stopped near the entrance to the walled village and began to weep. One of the guards came over. "What is wrong?" "I need to find my father. I have given all his gifts away. I gave my teacup away, my set of precious paints are almost gone, and my singing bowl is now someone else's treasure. Oh, I see. I think there is a man in the castle that may help you find your gift giver." She started through the gate, through the village, and up the hill to the castle. This was the first time she walked to the castle. She wondered who lived in this wondrous castle. She knocked on the door, and a woman answered. On her shoulder was one of the magical birds from the birch tree. "We have been waiting for you," she shared as she opened the door. As she stepped through the doors, she could see the many magical birds flying around the castle. "Do I know you?" the girl replied. "No, you don't know me. Yet I know you," the woman hesitantly replied. As she walked through the hallways leading to a great throne room, she saw a man in the corner of her eye. This was the man she saw needing water at the side of the road, begging. This man walked up to her and said, "I think this is your teacup. I think this teacup is yours." As he passed off her precious rose teacup to her, she was surprised. As she continued walking, she heard the sound of her singing bowl at the end of the hallway. There was a man on the throne with a cloak on. He was running his fingers along her singing bowl she had given away to make a delightful sound. As she walked in and looked closely, it was her father who had been sitting on the side of the road. She hadn't recognized him with a large black cloak on. He lifted her cloak. "My child, you are precious to me. The last trip I came here, and I learned there were no heirs to the throne of our village. Once the king had passed away several days ago, I was told I was the first in line. I am a distant living cousin. However, I am weak and old, and I need an heir that will be compassionate and kind. We need a kingdom to be turned to a testimony of giving, compassion, and empathy. Will you be our next queen when I leave the throne because of my old age? I don't have the skills to manage a kingdom, Father. I will need to learn from the past advisors as well as yourself." "Yes, you do. You gave the thirsty man water. Secondly, you painted a direction for the lost traveler, and you helped them guide their way. You provided for the poor man by giving him your precious bowl. In all of these stories, you chose to be a giver and connect with others." "What about my sisters?" "Look outside, my daughter." He guided her to look outside the castle window, and she saw her sisters entering the village below. "They will be welcomed into my home, yet you, my daughters, our daughter, will be the testimony of our kindness. In time, I hope for all my daughters to learn how to show kindness, compassion, and empathy. I am so honored. I am so grateful for you. Grateful you are king. The teacup, the paints, and the singing bowl meant so much. Father, you were the gift giver, and in turn, I was able to use your gifts to help others. As they leaned closer to each other, the father shared, "Yes, you understand. You gave water and food to the weary, and painted the path for the traveler, brought a song to the beggar. You are the one who shines because of your care and love for the people of this land. I am grateful for your kindness." The father and daughter embraced, and the daughter came to understand that small actions built on kindness, empathy, peace, and compassion are the pillars of love in our lives. The end.
3, 2, 1, action!